I'm not exactly sure what it was, but I saw something strange in the woods outside of Homer, Nebraska. There's an old graveyard out here that is infamous for having a witch buried there and is kind of a local spot for kids to go and scare themselves. Most of the land out there is flat and is used for farming, but this graveyard sits on the edge of a big hill and is surrounded by thick woods all around. Anyways, one night at around midnight, me and 5 of my friends decided to go out there in the woods and find the grave because the one in the actual graveyard is fake and supposedly the real one is out in the forest. So we begin our adventure trekking through the dark night forest. Me in the back because I'm the biggest and strongest. It doesn't take us long to find the real grave, as a couple of the people I was with have been there before. We stick around for a couple of minutes just fucking around trying to scare each other, and we all just got this instinctual feeling of dread. I know a lot of stories talk about this, but it's a very real feeling, like your body's responding to danger before you can even realize what's going on. It's probably worth mentioning that as a kid I lived in a haunted house, and I've been in situations where I've been attacked with a knife and jumped, and I've never felt this feeling before. We decided to get the fuck away from that grave. Now this is where us being stupid teenagers almost got us killed. One of the kids I was with says that some people grow pot out here, and that he knows where to find some. So even though we all clearly felt something was wrong, we decided, fuck it, let's get high. As we started walking back through the woods again, I began to feel like we were being watched, and every now and then I would get rustling of leaves, or just the crackling of undergrowth from behind me. I had told my friends we needed to move faster, but they were all just saying I was trying to fuck with them. Eventually, as we keep walking, we stumble upon a clearing, and we can't really see anything ahead of us, when all of a sudden my friend starts taking off for the other end of the clearing, and we all go after him, and all around us we can hear cattle freaking the hell out. That might sound anticlimactic, but you try getting chased by a 1,200-pound bull. So after we get a couple of yards away from the cows, something scares them way worse than us. I mean, I've never heard a sound like that coming from an animal. It was a horrible mix of the cows being scared to death by something, and like an unearthly, ear-shattering scream. We hit a 360 nope scope the hell out of there in the opposite direction. Now, by this time, I realized we were lost in the middle of the woods at 2 a.m. with something stalking us. I finally convinced everyone that we should change our direction so we could get to the road, and about 30 minutes later we are making great progress as someone spots headlights way out in front of us that we can see at the top of the hill we were on. So we start walking down towards the road when I notice the sounds behind us had started back up again. I turn to my friend and tell him to point his iPhone flashlight back behind us. I only saw something for a second, but about 30 yards behind us, I saw a blackish-brown figure with yellow eyes lean its head out from behind a tree, and then quickly duck back behind it. This is what really freaked me out, as animals around here don't sneak around and duck behind trees. I got the best look at it out of my friends, and the head looked kind of like a gaunt German shepherd. There aren't any wolves or bears around here. As far as I know, there aren't any large predators at all. It was a little bit elevated, but it was still eye level with me. I am 6'2", and this thing was at least 6 foot. At this point I take the fuck off. I swear I never ran so fast in my life. We make it to the road in under 5 minutes, but realized we came out on the other side of the woods and have to walk back 3 miles down the road to our cars. It was honestly the scariest night of my life, and to make things worse, I ended up losing my wallet out there that night. I have been back multiple times, but never at night now. Whatever it was not human or animal. Based on other stories I heard, I think it might have been a skinwalker. This area is not far from a reservation, but your guess is as good as mine. If anyone has any idea what it might have been, please let me know.
I'm from Michigan. I'm from a small town, which is scattered around the home state, and they really aren't uncommon. Ever since I was a kid and we moved away, I would spend the summer at my grandmother's house. Now I'm fresh out of high school, and my grandmother offered to have me come live up there for 6 months with her. My grandmother is the toughest person I've ever met in my life. And when I say that, I mean it. She's skinny but strong and tall. She drinks beer and smokes like a sailor. She owns many guns, and often goes out on her own hunting. In Michigan, There is a myth of this thing called Dogman. Kind of like a werewolf, but it has the head of a dog and the body of a hairy man. Its eyes are said to be either blue or amber, and it walks on 2 feet, standing at a solid 7 feet tall. It shows up in 10-year cycles, sometimes with others, sometimes alone. It's native to Michigan and stays there for some reason. The stories and legends about it have been around for a long time. I remember my family joking around and telling me stories since I was little. I think it's following me, and I know how crazy this sounds. Maybe the fear has hyped me up, but I've always been very open-minded when it comes to these things. It started when my grandmother asked me if I wanted to go hunting with her. I have always been slightly scared of the woods. They make me very uneasy, but knowing she was there made me feel safe. So I agreed, even though I didn't plan on killing anything because that wasn't my style. So the next week we packed up and headed out to a deer blind that my family often used. It was very deep in the woods, and took an hour or so of walking just to get to it. When we got up, we settled in and started watching. When you're in a deer blind, you're supposed to be very quiet. But I got really bored, and I started having small whispered conversations with my grandmother. I wasn't really looking for deer, because honestly I didn't care, but a day out with her seemed nice. She suddenly looked over at me and shushed me, and my heart skipped a little at the thought of a deer finally showing up. I'd never done this before, but when my grandmother pulled down the wooden cover for the entrance and put a hand over my mouth, I just knew something was wrong. Even being 18 years old, I'd never even seen her scared. She is a tough old bastard, so when I saw the troubled expression on her face, I started to panic. My heart was beating so fast I thought it was going to burst. After what seemed like days, she finally let go of me, motioned for me to stay quiet, and started packing up. She pulled the cover off, looked around, and we were back on our way. Our pace was way faster than when we walked in there, and I was constantly looking behind my shoulder. I didn't know what we were afraid of, but I knew it was out there, and if she was scared, I sure the hell was. When we got home, I asked her what she had seen, and she said it was just a bear, which I knew that was a lie, but I'll let it go, forcing myself to believe it, thinking I could lure myself into a false sense of security, and just let it go. My gram never lied to me. She was always very straight, so when she did, I knew for sure that she wasn't telling the truth. I failed to mention earlier, but she owns a beautiful dog named Foster. He is the biggest sweetheart ever, but he never liked to come inside, so he lives out in a small stone doghouse that was across the guest bedroom. That night, I heard something that sounded like a scream from out in the woods. It was bone-chilling and terrifying. I had never heard anything like that in my life. I could hear Foster starting to growl. I quickly dismissed it as an owl, and thought about looking out of the window to see what he was growling about, but to hell with that, I'm a total scaredy cat. After a while, his growling stopped, and I managed to go to sleep. Just like in a horror movie cliche, though, the next morning he was gone. At night, we took his collar into a wire that is attached to a clothesline type thing that lets him run around and keeps him in a small radius, and it was snapped. It was like he wanted to get away from something and he had gnawed it. I asked if she wanted to go see if we could find him, maybe rattle around his treat bag or something, and she quickly shut me down, saying he would be back and not to worry. But I was. How could she say that? The wire has never broken like that before, and she loves him to death. I thought she would at least want to know if he's alright, but much like other incidents, I quickly put it in the back of my mind with unease. A few days later after that, Foster didn't come back, but on the trees behind our house, there was some huge gouge marks, which I pointed out to her. She dismissed it as a very large bear. The next few days were pretty uneventful, except for last night. I'm still shaking as I write this. I was laying down in hopes of drifting off to sleep when I heard it again. The scream that made me stop and freeze up. Terror seemed to course through my veins and seize me up, even making me hold my breath. The scream sounded again, closer and closer again, where I swear it was in the woods right by our house. I thought of running to my grandmother, but I knew she would just fake something and make me go back. I thought again about looking out the window, but I was too scared. I don't think I could move my legs at this point. That's when the blinds went black. Since there are no cities around us, the light from the stars and the moon are pretty bright, and the window stays a faint blue. But the light was gone. It was just black. I heard it. The guttural breathing that was on the other side of the window. I prayed that whatever it was wouldn't just smash through the window and eat me up right there. I couldn't move or blink. I couldn't cry. I knew that it knew I was there. It scratched one time on the window, like nails on a chalkboard, and let out a scream. It was so loud. I felt like it was right next to my ear. After that, I'm pretty sure it ran away. I'm so shaky. I didn't want to look and see what was on the other side of that window. I was afraid to sleep. Afraid to face tomorrow night. I know it's not just a bear that made that noise. I swear to God, nothing does.
Hello. I recently discovered this site and have been following it for the past couple of weeks. I just read your post on April 2nd, the Men in Black mystery, and I'm completely jarred by the similarity of one eyewitness account to something I saw a few years ago. I've very rarely spoken about it simply because it was so singular and difficult to describe, and I've never heard about anything even remotely similar until just now. This happened in Montrose, Colorado in 2012. I was staying with a friend who lived in a house perched on the edge of Spring Creek Mesa overlooking the town. The view of the town lights were so beautiful, so we liked to go for walks at night whenever I stayed there. Her house was surrounded by farm fields and had just one close neighbor, so it was very quiet and peaceful at night. There's a tiny dirt road that runs along the edge of the mesa, towards the homes of the farmers who own the fields, and that's where we would walk. Just a few feet to the side of the road, the ground drops off steeply and slopes down about 100 feet. The hillside is very rocky and covered in trees and bushes. Not something you'd want to find yourself rolling down if you went too far in the dark, so we usually only walked until the moon was out. On this particular night, the moon was so full and so bright that we commented on how it was practically daylight. We hadn't gotten far from the house when I noticed something standing on the left-hand side of the road, no more than 30 feet ahead. I knew my friend saw it too because we both froze. I could see clearly thanks to the moonlight and how close it was, but I struggled to describe it. It was 4, maybe 4.5 feet tall, and had a somewhat humanoid shape, with a distinct head, torso, arms, and legs, but it was more narrow than a person, and the legs were disproportionately short, while the rest of the body parts were freakishly elongated, even the head. It seemed to be matte gray all over and had no features whatsoever. No face, no hair, nothing. But the most alarming thing was, it was so thin that it looked like a suit of clothes on a hanger. It had a shape from the front, but from the side it was practically paper thin. I got a look at it from the side because moments after we caught sight of it, it turned and crossed the road in front of us. I can't think of an accurate way to describe how it moved. The legs seemed to move a little, but it didn't seem to take steps. There was no up and down motion. It glided almost fluidly across the road over the edge of the mesa. I was so shocked that I can't remember if it made any noise as it headed down the hillside with all its bushes and loose rocks. A few seconds later, my friend and I looked at each other and said, "Did you see that?" almost simultaneously. Then we just turned and ran like hell back to her house. I'm completely at a loss to surmise what this thing may have been. The visual is firmly imprinted in my memory, especially that unbelievable thinness, and I haven't heard tell of anything similar until I read the former mail carrier story about the things they encountered in D.C. While the sightings were 1,600 miles apart, and the thing I saw wasn't wearing any garments, the description of the total flatness stood out to me instantly. I'm wondering if anyone else has ever seen anything like this.